Welcome to the Monocle Banking Podcast, curated by Monocle Solutions, where we break down the complex to bring you clarity on the financial forces shaping our world. Well, today on the Monocle Banking Podcast, we meet a man who went from formulating anti-aging creams for oil of Olay to enriching isotopes that could one day power the next generation of nuclear reactors. Paul Mann's career reads like a merger between MIT Tech Review and the Financial Times. He's got a Cambridge-trained chemical engineering background. He's done time on the trading floors of Soros Fund Management and Morgan Stanley, and is now CEO of ASP Isotopes, a NASDAQ-listed isotope enrichment company with deep roots in South Africa and some pretty bold ambitions to reshape global supply chains across medicine, semiconductors, and clean energy, with the world in urgent need of secure, non-Russian sources of key isotopes and markets racing to commercialize quantum computing and small modular reactors. ASP Isotopes might just be in the right place at the right time with the right tech. So buckle in. It isn't your average deep tech story. It's what happens when, I think, you see physics, finance, and geopolitics collide. Paul, welcome, and great to have you on the podcast. Your journey from being a research scientist at Procter & Gamble to managing billions at Soros Fund Management and Highbridge Capital is anything but linear. What's the common thread that links these very different chapters of your career?
Yeah, so I've always invested in stuff that I understand. And so my background has always been in chemicals and healthcare, pharmaceuticals. They're the only two sectors I've ever really invested in. So at Morgan Stanley, I covered the healthcare sector initially and then the chemical sector. At Soros, I directed investments into the healthcare industry and the chemicals industry. And at Highbridge Capital, I ran a portfolio consisting of chemicals and healthcare companies, and that ties into my background of what I studied at Cambridge, chemical engineering, chemistry, and then working in healthcare research and development, So that's my entire industry. And that's really how we got interested in isotopes, was during that time. Some of the best investments I made were shorting companies that needed isotopes. And the isotope industry supply chain was so fragile that very regularly these companies missed quarters because they couldn't get hold of the products they needed. And that's how I became so aware of the industry supply-demand imbalance many years ago.
What leads to that fragility in the global isotope industry before we talk exactly to what ASP Isotopes does?
Yeah, so stable isotopes, there are only really two countries that produce stable isotopes certainly what the ones we're interested in for global demand. That's Russia and the Netherlands. And then when you think about radioisotopes, radioisotopes, take molybdenum-99, for example, that has a 2.5 day half-life. And so every 2.5 days, your inventory is losing half its value. And so you've got to ship these products around the world. If they get stuck on a runway for a few hours or a few days, then you've just lost half the value of the product, So that's really why the supply chains are so fragile. There are very few producers of them. And in terms of radioisotopes, they don't last very long.
You obviously came across this during your fund management days, investing in a way that was shorting companies exposed to this kind of risk. What then led you to pivot to begin a business and to found ASP Isotopes? I see a couple of South Africans on the board as well. Maybe you could also just share a little bit more about that South African DNA and the roots that you have through to Pretoria.
So actually, this opportunity ended up on the desk of our chief operating officer, and he was a debt restructuring expert based in London. And the question was, can you restructure this group of scientists' debt? He took a look at it and said, no, I can't restructure it, and neither can anyone else. But he showed it to me just to see if I understood what the industry was about. And I immediately recognized this could solve a lot of the supply chain problems that have existed in the world for the last sort of 15, 20 years. And I also recognized a lot of new emerging uses for isotopes where there isn't immediately kind of interested in it. And so we acquired the assets via a business rescue process in South Africa. That was back in September 2021. And then since then, we've raised about $100 million and we built these 3 plants in South Africa a bit later. In terms of the South African interest, got Hendrik Strydom is our Chief Technology Officer. He was on the board of ASP Isotopes, and again, he was one of the scientists who we acquired the assets from, and he just transferred to the board of QLE, Quantum Leap Energy. And we've just hired Sipho Maseko to join the board about 2 weeks ago, and he's a very well-known South African businessman who's been extremely helpful in how we. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've been talking to him for a number of years, and he gets what we do, and he's helped us get into talking to a lot of government officials and getting into meetings that, it was always challenging to get into as a foreigner, and he's been extremely helpful. So it's great to have him on the board. When you look at our company, I think as of about 2 weeks ago, we had 153 employees in the company. 149 are based in South Africa. We've had an amazing opportunity to hire fantastic South African scientists and engineers and build this business, which we would struggle to do in any other country, actually. I mean, you just don't get the same quality of engineers and scientists elsewhere.
A fascinating story. And I see another, Gerdus Kemp is the medical director and CEO of PET Labs, founded PET Lab Pharmaceuticals in South Africa, also on the board. Highly competent, PhD level competence and skills this. And before we go into the technology, you have said in your filings that South Africa's support staff, regulators, suppliers, as you've just said, having Sipho Maseko being able to open the doors to the right government departments and officials has been instrumental in getting ASPI off the ground. What lessons do you think South Africa's industrial policymakers can take from your particular experience?
So it's really important to have a global, to give opportunities to global companies to come to South Africa and do engineering and building and make things, make industrial projects and make products that could be sold around the world. But it's been fascinating that the quality of the engineers in South Africa is just amazing. The nuclear engineers are incredible. It's quite interesting that DOE has sent 30 American students to Northwest University to learn nuclear engineering at about $1 million a student, because those skills just don't exist in the United States. And we're looking at building plants in the USA and in Europe, and we're struggling to find the engineers we need and the nuclear physicists and nuclear scientists to do that.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important South Africa opens its doors and welcomes other companies of other countries to come to the country and build things and employ people and create a lot of wealth for the population.
Yeah, and those skills, certainly date back to South Africa's uranium enrichment program in the 1980s. And we've also, we had the pebble bed small modular reactor. There was a lot of research and development that went into this technology. Given the geopolitical climate in the West's increasing unease with reliance on Russian isotopes, do you think South Africa is poised potentially to become a global isotope hub here? Could Pretoria be the new Dubna?
I see no reason why not. So let's take a look at the small pebble bed reactor, first of all, the PBMR program, okay? So that program got shut down in, I can't remember, was it 2012, 13, 14, that kind of time frame. And, many of those scientists moved to the United States, Washington, and set up a company called X Energy. And, South Africa was just, 5 years ahead of the market. And the market wasn't ready for a small modular reactor 15 years ago. It is now. But South Africa had the skills, had the scientists to develop that program. Now, again, we've hired a lot of the scientists who were involved in the uranium enrichment program back in the 1980s, and they're obviously senior years now. So we've also hired a lot of young scientists, physicists, chemists, engineers to learn the skills from them, so we can transfer that knowledge base to young scientists, young in the late 20s, early 30s, to make sure we have the longevity to keep going for a number of years. No reason why South Africa cannot become a major player in the isotope market over the next several years.
If we look at the small modular reactor, why is the time right now? Because we have seen in the past major SMR projects, I think NuScale in the US in particular, walk back timelines and kind of costs spiraled out of control. Why should investors believe that SMRs will be any different from the kind of giant nuclear boondoggles of the past?
So listen, the world needs more energy. And I'm told, or experts tell me, the world needs to double the amount of electricity it produces by 2050. And it has to do that while maintaining a kind of a flat carbon footprint. Solar's great, wind is great when you have sun and when you have wind. But if you haven't got sun, you haven't got wind, or it's not blowing today, it's not sunny today, you've kind of got a problem. So nuclear is going to be needed to supply a base load to the grid for most countries. And I think that's now widely accepted. Now, the problem with the large nuclear reactors of yesterday is that, these gigawatt reactors, they cost $10-20 billion to build. They take 10-20 years to build. Typically there's huge cost overruns and time overruns. And, when you build these massive reactors, in the middle of nowhere, and you've got to transport that energy to the population. So you've got a huge transmission grid as well that you need to build. So, that's a huge problem, building those reactors and those transmission grids. The small modular reactors are first of all, as the name suggests, they're smaller. You can site them closer to populations of people. When you think about what made a car cheap, it was the Ford Model T, taking a car to production line engineering. This takes production line engineering or production line manufacturing to the nuclear world. So you're making the same reactor over and over, building more of them. Most of it's built off-site and transported to the site and just dropped in location. When you think about the exclusion zone around Coburg, I think it's 6 kilometers. The exclusion zone around TerraPower's small modular reactors, I think 400 meters. So, these are much more bite-sized kind of pieces of investment that can be done quickly to grow energy to populations of people that don't have energy today or don't have enough energy today. So, they're needed, and the time is right for them now. The problem they all have is they haven't got the fuel to go in them. They need this HALEU, this high assay low-enriched uranium. The only supplier of HALEU in the world is Russia, and Russia's unlikely to be able to supply the quantities that are needed. And that's where we come in, because we'd like to be a leading supplier of HALEU, high assay low-enriched uranium, to these reactors.
Right, and that's where Quantum Leap Energy, that your nuclear fuel arm, comes in. And I see you've inked a term sheet with TerraPower, which is, as we know, backed by Bill Gates as well. You signed an MOU with the Nuclear Energy Corporation of South Africa. What's the timeline and the commercial significance of these partnerships? And I must say, Paul, I agree with your assessment. I think it's cloud cuckoo land thinking to think that we're going to be able to power a world in which India, China, all of the emerging economies and their energy demands are growing based purely on variable renewable energy. Even with battery energy storage, we've got to be talking about innovative new nuclear. And I think in South Africa, maybe I'm just going on here from the question, but there's always been a cloud over nuclear because of past issues around large-scale procurement and potential corruption under the Zuma administration. How have you found the conversation in South Africa now? Has it moved on? And do you think the regulators are really on side with this vision?
You've now got an incredible government managing the country. I think the energy minister, Minister Ramakopa, is an incredible, fantastic person who's doing a great job in terms of recognizing the need for more energy. Energy creates manufacturing. Manufacturing jobs have the highest multiplier effect in an economy. And so to grow the economy, one needs more manufacturing jobs, you need more energy. It's all, and I think people realize that now, people recognize it. And, I don't think it means phasing out coal or phasing out gas. It means adding to coal and adding to gas with more energy to create more jobs and a more vibrant manufacturing sector. So I think South Africa's got ambitious goals to add more nuclear power. That will drive a manufacturing industry that the world needs. And so it'll be fantastic for the country. So I think, listen, politicians now recognize what's needed and making big moves. We'd like to be part of that. We'd like to supply the fuel for those reactors. I'm looking forward to doing that. Yeah, absolutely.
And then in terms of timeline and the process is from here, but what are the next steps in terms of bringing this to commercial feasibility?
Yeah, ASP also stands for as soon as possible. So soon as possible. We're working hard. We're working hard to get it done. So listen, we're talking to the National Nuclear Regulator. We're talking to the DE, the Department of Energy and Electricity. Talking to very heavily to Nexa as well and to TerraPower. And, listen, we're working as hard as we can, as fast as we can. The world needs this new fuel now, not next decade. And I think that's one of the reasons why TerraPower is interested to sign the term sheet with us, is that, Helen Harbour is a location where we could potentially enrich fuel much faster than we can in the United States and in Europe. Building a greenfield site in the USA and Europe could take 10, 20 years just to build the site, let alone build the enrichment facility. Here you have a facility ready to go. You have a lot of engineers ready to go. You have a whole supply chain ecosystem ready to move and start making this fuel for them. So I think that's one of the reasons why TerraPower were keen to sign this contract with us. The second reason is that quantum enrichment, our second enrichment technology, we believe can really reshape the price of nuclear fuel. And in order to solve the climate crisis in the future, it's not about getting more nuclear reactors into the United States and Europe. It's about solving the energy supply situation in the emerging markets and the developing nations. And, we can't expect them to pay for the West's problem, which is global warming. We have to find a solution that allows green energy to trade at a discount to hydrocarbon energy. And in order to do that, you have to have cheap reactors and cheap fuel. And we believe our process can generate much cheaper fuel than anyone else can. And that will allow nuclear to trade at a green discount to hydrocarbon.
Well, let's demystify that science, but the ASP and the quantum enrichment technology for listeners. What exactly is aerodynamic separation process, ASP technology, and how is it different from traditional isotope enrichment methods like centrifuges or lasers?
So in ASP, we take a stationary wall centrifuge, so it's basically a tube, and we spin the gas inside the tube, and we do certain things to it, which is our know-how and our knowledge. We put it through various valves and bend it through various corners and things, and that allows us to separate heavy from light isotopes. Now, what are the advantages of this process? Well, first of all, we can enrich light isotopes. So a centrifuge can only enrich heavy isotopes. So those isotopes with masses way over 100. We actually prefer lighter isotopes. So that allows us to enrich things like silane for quantum computing and carbon-14 for nuclear medicine and for new drugs. So that's one of the advantages. Second thing is they're much smaller plants. The footprint is tiny. They're quick to build, cheap to build, and they're modular. So we can grow the plant as demand grows. One of the downsides is that we use quite a lot of energy in our process relative to a centrifuge. But I think if you look at the levelized cost, i.e. the cost of the plant and production cost, we're coming well below that of a centrifuge. So we've built 2 ASP plants in South Africa. The first is enriching silicon-28, and that will enable next generation semiconductors. So that'll enable things like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, much faster semiconductors, which will power the computers of the future. And we've signed a contract there, one with a large US semiconductor company and with a global industrial gas company to sell that product to them. And then we've also built a carbon-14 plant, which will allow pharmaceutical companies to develop new drugs and agrochemical companies to develop new agrochemicals. And so they're the 2 ASP plants, and we're looking to build more plants in the future using ASP.
So, I mean, you've broken into 3 massive industries, medical, semiconductors, and nuclear as well. The tech was originally developed by Clyden. What shape was it when you took over, and how have you and Dr. Hendrik Stratum evolved it to become commercially viable when combining it as well with this new quantum enrichment technology?
So we've spent a lot of money down here developing the technology. The basis of the technology was there, but it wasn't ready to build a plant. It wasn't suitable for commercial plants. We spent a lot of time and money investing in our research department and our research team. We've added 3 new test benches to our facilities. Clyden was just basically starved of capital and starved of money. They had the scientists, didn't really have the money to develop this into a commercially viable product. We've basically done that. In terms of quantum enrichment, again, it really was just a theory when we acquired Clyden. We've put a lot of money into our new laser department. We've hired a lot of laser physicists. We spend a lot of money investing in PhD students at Wits University and Stellenbosch, who do a lot of our beam shaping and spectroscopy. We've managed to turn this into a product as well that is now able to enrich ytterbium-176, which is fantastic. And that first plant is starting to produce commercial samples. When you look at the urgent need for more medical isotopes, ytterbium-176 is basically the feedstock for Novartis' new drug called Pluvicto. If you look at the clinical trial, 5% of patients died because they couldn't actually make the drug. That's how desperately short supply this product is. And again, we hope to alleviate that supply chain problem.
And you've also said that your plants produce no radioactive or chemical waste, which is remarkable. And I guess in a world that is moving towards ESG more determinantly, it's a big differentiator for you in an institutional pitch. How have you managed to achieve this with no radioactive or chemical waste?
To be fair, most enrichment processes have little radioactive or nuclear waste because when you think about our process, we take, let's just say, 100 kilos of feedstocks, let's say 100 kilos of silane. We then produce a few kilos of highly enriched silane and quite a few kilos of depleted tails. And those depleted tails are valuable to other customers. So we sell both our product stream and our tail stream. But a traditional chemical process, you get lots of waste products and byproducts, what have you, coming off that need to be treated, need to be disposed of and handled correctly. We don't have that in our process. It's not like a traditional chemical process.
And we know Russia has historically dominated C-14 supply. You're now kind of stepping into that void. So, the geopolitical tailwinds are there for you to really translate that into real customer conversion. Do you worry about tech obsolescence? And I have to ask this because it's a field where you would think there's a lot of VC money that's being poured into things and ventures like this, new startups. How future-proof is your current isotope focus given the speed of scientific advancement?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that keeps me awake at night always is, can someone else come in and do what we're doing? And listen, I think if someone had $50 to $100 million in 10 years, they could probably build a plant and start competing against us. But it would take a long time. Permitting in the United States and Europe would take a long time as well. And so the question is, demand or desire to do that. And right now, we don't really see that. And also, there's not a lot of skilled scientists who do this kind of stuff outside of South Africa and Russia and so on. So, I think getting the people, getting the permits, getting the money just takes a lot of time. So we have a multiple year head start over everyone else. And also, we're continually improving our process. So, I think from the days when South Africa enriched uranium, Clydon improved the energy efficiency by about 40-fold. We have subsequently improved it by about 5-fold. So, I mean, we're continually getting better, always striving for lower cost economics and to drive down that cost of goods and drive up that product quality.
What about proliferation? Enriching uranium, even high-assay, low-enriched uranium, must raise some flags. Have you had any friction with regulators, especially from the US, the IAEA, or any of those about setting up an enrichment facility in South Africa?
No, we haven't at all, actually. And, I know the DOE are aware of what we're doing. When your energy minister, Minister Ramakopa, went to Washington, D.C. in, I believe it was November last year, he met with the DOE. My understanding is Terra Power were there as well. If you look at the CEO of Terra Power's LinkedIn page, you'll see a picture of him and Minister Ramakopa in Washington, D.C. last November. And so, they're aware of what we're doing. And obviously, all of our plants come under comprehensive safeguard agreements with the IAEA. So the IAEA can inspect our plants with just a couple of hours warning. They visit twice a year. And, we have a very good relationship with the IAEA. We obviously port all of our materials to the IAEA. They know what we're doing. It's a very, very strictly, tightly controlled industry, and rightly so it should be. And we obviously do our bit to make sure that we comply with all the regulations. And actually, those regulations are important to us because they protect our IP. And so we're actually big proponents and believers in the Non-Proliferation Act.
Are you worried just with the turn that the political relationship has taken between the US and Foggy Bottom just of late? South Africa and the administration's signing with Hamas at the ICJ against Israel certainly upset many Republicans and chief amongst them Donald Trump. He seems to be training his guns at South Africa at the moment. Do you worry about the kind of high-level geopolitics potentially tripping you up?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a concern. There's always geopolitical concerns around the world. The world is going through a change right now. I think the world will end up in a better place after this change has kind of taken place. But I think ultimately, South Africa, I view South Africa being a very neutral country, and it's been a very favorable place to operate in. So listen, there's always, arguments going on about something. And right now there's but I think it'll blow over. It'll sort itself out.
From a kind of operating perspective, you're now chasing HALEU before really proving steady cash flow from isotopes like C14 or Si28. Are you concerned potentially that you're exposing ASPI to headline risk and capital dilution before you've even scaled the bread and butter part of the business?
Yeah, listen, we have to start moving on HALEU right now because the world needs it right now. We can't wait 5 years or 2 years or 3 years to do that. So we've been working on HALEU for quite some time. Doesn't mean we spent a lot of money on it. We've committed some resources to it, and we have some scientists working on it. And I think, the next 6 months, we've just started up our first facilities, and that should help the company drive forwards towards free cash flow generation. And then off we go. Our first HALEU plant in South Africa is likely being largely funded by Terra Power. And so, we've signed a term sheet with Terra Power, which will involve them or allow them or expect them to invest in the facility. And that should mean there's no dilution to our investors or our balance sheet. It's all coming from Terra Power. So they've been pushing us to move faster. If you look, we've also signed a research contract with them for $2 million. we weren't prepared to fund the research into HALO on our balance sheet. We said, you're going to have to pay for it. And so they did. So listen, we've got a lot of support from the industry who know that we believe and hope that we can help solve this current problem. So, we're working hard towards doing that.
And you've raised, as you said, what is it, $100 million to date? What's your capital allocation priority for 2025 and beyond?
We've built 3 plants that are up and running now, which is fantastic. And so I think, we'll put some capital into building more laser plants here in South Africa. I think that's important. And then, we may put some more capital into building a plant in Iceland later on this year as well. But, I'm the biggest shareholder. I put the first money into the company. I think very much about return on capital. And so no plant we will ever build will have an IRR of less than 30%, absolute minimum. And we look more like 50 to 100% for our IRRs. And so, unlike a lot of other industries, we're very, very focused on return on capital and speed of return on capital.
And you're listing on the JSE later this year. Good news story for the JSE. Our capital markets need new and exciting listings like this. Why now? Or why is this dual listing more than just a kind of symbolic nod to your roots? What does it unlock for ASPI?
Listen, we had to list on the JSE. I mean, our balance sheet and our investors may come from the United States, but actually our heartbeat is here in South Africa. And, we've spoken to a number of South African investors who've wanted to invest in the company and have struggled to because we've only got a NASDAQ listing. And so we promised them, we promised our employees, we promised many people in South Africa, we may be a US incorporated company, but our heartbeat's here in South Africa. And we need to support the local economy, the local fund managers, and allow them to invest in high quality businesses that are global in nature. And so that's the reason for doing it. I mean, we have to thank South Africa quite a lot for welcoming us, allowing us to come to South Africa and operate in the country. We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the South African people. So let's make sure they have an opportunity to benefit from this investment and this growth.
Yeah, and very encouraging to see how the new administration is rolling out the red carpet, because previously it was more about putting up roadblocks and that kind of thing for investment in new technologies that are so desperately needed. Paul Mann, thank you very much, CEO of ASP Isotopes, for sharing your journey and your vision with us here on the Monocle Banking Podcast. Take care. Well, that was Paul Mann, the CEO of ASP Isotopes, a man whose business card could plausibly read Chief Executive of the Periodic Table, from enriching carbon-14 for pharma trials, silicon-28 for quantum chips, to preparing South Africa for the high-assay, low-energy uranium future, HALEU-powered nuclear future. This is a company not just occupying a niche, but actually creating it as it goes. And whether you're an investor, a policymaker, or just someone wondering what happens when Russia's isotope tap gets turned off, this conversation offers a glimpse into the future of advanced materials, supply chain independence, and the essential physics that quietly powers modern life. For more deep dives into the business of innovation from finance to fission, keep it locked to the Monocle Banking Podcast. I'm Michael Avery. See you next time.